High-paying jobs going unfilled at the very same time that highly skilled workers face unemployment, as GM workers in Oshawa currently do. Last week's federal budget took note of such labor market mismatches with programs aimed at reskilling workers. How far will those take us? And what else needs to be added? Let's find out from Stephen Murphy. He is president and vice chancellor of Ontario Tech University, newly rebranded just today. That's formerly UOIT. Mike McDermott is here. He's the founder and CEO of the cloud accounting software company FreshBooks. Gladys Okine is executive director of First Work, Ontario's youth employment network, and a member of the federal government's Future Skills Council. And Sunil Johal, policy director at the Mowat Centre, which is now associated with the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the U of T. And we're delighted to welcome everybody here today. A very propitious day for you and your institution. I have a little swag here. Shall we hold this up here? This is the, I guess, formerly the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, which here on will be now known as Ontario Tech University. Yes. Not Georgia Tech.
No, retaining our full name, but that will be our short form, absolutely.
Not Texas Tech, Ontario Tech.
Ontario Tech is the place to be.
There you go. Okay, thanks for the swag. Let's start with what I suspect is one of the toughest challenges you are dealing with right now, which is the Ontario government, a few weeks back, announced that students will be getting a 10% break on their tuition starting next year. That means less revenue for you and less expenditure for them. But how are you dealing with that?
It does. Yeah, it's a significant challenge. I think that in general, as universities, we realize that the province is in a fiscally tough situation. So we're all rolling up our sleeves and doing our best to take a good look at our operations to see where we can be more efficient. So we understand that. For us, it's a real opportunity to be strategic. As a young university, as one that's rebranding, it's a real opportunity to ask ourselves, what are we doing? How can we best serve our students in a way that is different and unique and that will help us to leapfrog over other people? So, the old adage that you never miss out on using a good crisis, we're certainly making sure that for us, our people are focused on the strategic direction because we know in a year or two, given cycles of government, that things will change. And
okay, but Stephen, the key word there is crisis. The key word you used is crisis. Is it 10%? Cut for student tuition, which doesn't represent a 10% cut to your bottom line. It's less than that.
Yeah.
But does that represent a potential crisis for Ontario Tech?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it is crisis. I'd say that it is a significant hit. For us, it's an $8 and $13 million hit, year one and year two out, which is a substantial portion of our budget. So there are definitely ways that we have to look at doing business differently. What we didn't want to ever touch was the core of the student experience, which we think is a phenomenal experience at our university and at most Ontario universities. So it's really about how can we do things smarter and how do we use this as an opportunity to springboard into areas like skills and areas like stackable credentials and areas we need to be moving toward that are actually more cost efficient once you have that initial cash outlay.
The minister says she's challenging you all to be more innovative and you will, I'm sure. You're here because you're innovative. Tell us about FreshBooks. What is that?
Founded here in Toronto, Canada, when I saved over an invoice over a decade ago. Since then, it's a software company. What we do is we help small business owners manage their accounting. So if you have no employees, up to about 20 employees, that's who we're built for. Since we started here, not too far from these studios, to be honest, over 20 million people have used our software. We have paying customers in over 120 countries. We have hired some people from Stephen's school. We've been growing, and we're part of, and one of the first sort of companies that have become part of a growing part of the technology ecosystem here in Toronto. And we're a proud part of that community, which is putting Toronto on the map in terms of a world-class city to build technology companies.
I want to know if the students that come from our post-secondary institutions, including Stephen's, that come to you have the skills that are needed for you.
Some do. Waterloo.
And some
Most don't.
Most don't.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, what I would say is there's kind of a couple factions in the post-secondary approaches to this stuff. So what Waterloo does really well is it does a couple things. First, as far as I can tell, tries to understand what's going to be needed to craft and build. So we're largely hiring engineers and that kind of thing. So there's a strong connection to industry, let's put it that way, that influences the curriculum, and people are learning about how to build in our case, things like production systems and things like this, as opposed to the theory of computer science and math, which is what my alma mater, Queen's, would be sort of steering people towards. And so you marry that sort of curriculum and focus on practical use with what they do is a lot of co-op, and so you're sort of a trend towards a modern form of apprenticeship. And what's happening is the students are coming out of those schools, and they call it Stanford North for a reason. Those are two of the best engineering and product development schools in the world, and it's the reason why Google and Microsoft and FreshBooks spend time recruiting those students to be part of co-op programs, and then ultimately when they graduate, hope they join our organization. So they're way ahead of most schools in my experience, and I hope they keep doing what they're doing, and other people start paying attention and really rapidly changing how they do what they do.
Let's talk about another experience here. You are on the Mars Tech Talent Advisory Council. What's their mission?
So their mission is to address this problem that he just shared with us, the mismatch between the need of employers, growing tech ventures, the investment that's being made in this area, and how quickly Toronto is growing in this industry, but the challenge that new ventures and startups are experiencing in finding new talent. So the Tech Talent Advisory has really brought together community employment, academics, industry leaders to talk about how can we address our pain points together. What is it that we have available? What is it that we don't have available? And one of the things that's come out loud and clear in that discussion is that academics have a really difficult time quickly responding to the growing and changing needs of industry. And they've been very upfront and very direct about that. So when you talk about stackable credentials and other forms of learning that can help address those needs in a much quicker format, those are the things that we're starting to explore.
I actually had not heard that expression before, stackable credentials. What does that mean?
So I'll defer to you for a more academic explanation, but in my world, the way that I understand it, working with job seekers and employers, it is a more flexible way of learning. Over time, you can continue to study. You can take smaller increments of courses that add to a longer-term credential over time, but it's more flexible in terms of how you can approach it.
Stephen,
Is
you
that
want to add
fairly
that?
accurate?
Well said. Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's exactly that. If you can think of it as you might want to come back to take a course, but that course could also be, included in a course package for a diploma and a certificate. And so you get that certificate, and then you say, well, actually, if you continued, you might be able to get a degree with that. And so it's the stacking of the credentials for as far as you want to go, which is what we all have to do, is be thinking about how to bring back our learners past the age of 25.
Gotcha. We want to, Sheldon, should we put this chart up right now? This is the percentage of overqualified workers in Ontario and in Canada. We talk in this province and country now about people without jobs and jobs without people. For the sake of this chart, overqualified means an employer thinking someone has an education level that is higher than what is needed for the job. And for those listening on podcast, we're looking at a chart right now of Ontario going from having 26% of its workforce being overqualified in the year 2001, which was about the national average, but it has been climbing steadily, almost 10 points, to 35% last year, which is 2% higher than the national average. This is all Labour Market Information Council information. Sunil, what's, in your view, as you look at that chart, what's significant about it?
I mean, I think there's a few things that are driving this. I mean, we've seen a hollowing out of the so-called middle-skill jobs over the past 15 or 20 years in places like Ontario and Canada. And we've also at the same time seen a pressure on students to go to university, get that degree. That's your foothold into the labor market. And jobs that wouldn't have required even a university degree 30 years ago, now that's a bare minimum requirement even to get screened into the position. So I mean, I think we're seeing changes in the nature of jobs generally in advanced economies. Lots of those middle jobs are disappearing. We're seeing kind of a smaller percentage of those high-skilled jobs, a lot of routine jobs that still exist in the service sector. And the question becomes, how do we prepare for this, especially given technological disruptions like artificial intelligence and automation coming down the pipe? We're likely to see more of these changes happening more quickly. So the question becomes, how do we prepare our workforce and our citizens for these more frequent, more dislocative types of changes?
Can I put one idea to Gladys here? One of the ideas we have heard and discussed on this program in the past to deal with this mismatch is perhaps nudging students at a younger age, maybe even high school, towards careers. Good idea or bad idea?
High school is actually too late. So,
late.
so not a bad idea. It actually has been suggested, and research has shown that it needs to start earlier. So in middle school, as early as middle school, some are saying even as early as the 3rd grade. So, encouraging young people to explore what their options are as early as possible, but also connecting that to opportunities to experience some of those options are two things that we're missing in our ecosystem right now when it comes to skills development and workforce development. And then there's the other issue of, we're talking a lot about students, but we have an incredible number of young people who are not in school. And but we would like to encourage them to return at some point, should it make sense for them, whether it's college, university, some sort of technical training. And there are some investments that are being made to support those individuals. But it's a major issue. We are missing opportunities to encourage early exploration, but also the opportunity to step into different types of workplaces to experience some of these new and emerging industries.
Stephen, can I get you to comment on that? The notion that maybe even in elementary school, it's time to start talking careers with kids?
Yeah, well, I think that that's a reality, but I think that what we mean by careers is very different. So when we were in school, the notion of talking to a middle school child about a career is daunting. But really what we're saying is trying to get them thinking about what they're passionate about early on in life. Because the reality is that my students who are graduating today will have 7 to 12 to 15 gigs, as we call them, right? That's a very different career landscape from what we might have graduated into. So the notion that you're not going to be able to pivot is not a real one. You are going to be able to pivot and change and move, and you're going to be expected to. So having some initial passion, I think, is the real key. And then taking that passion and saying, where am I evolving to in my career? And how do I need to upskill myself as a matter of course? And I think as a country, that's a big thing we have to grapple with. It. You don't just finish your degree and then think that you're educated for the rest of your career. And we've got to get over this notion that I know Canadians don't like lifelong learning. And the Honourable Patty Haidu was at our campus just yesterday talking about skills training. Their data shows the same thing, that our adults don't like the term lifelong learning. So whatever we have to do, we have to make it less scary for adults to come back. And universities we're very guilty of, bringing people back to a zone that might not feel as comfortable as it needs to. So bringing people back with their colleagues, so they're in a class with others and not feeling like, am I going to flunk out of my test? Are they going to figure out that I'm not quite smart enough? We have to deal with those fears in order to, I think, have a systemic approach to skills training that's going to take us well into this century in terms of the needs we see in so many of our industries.
Well, apropos of that, the federal budget came out not too long ago, and Sunil and Mike, maybe I can get you two to start with some reaction to that. Lots of skills training measures in the federal budget. Canada Training Benefit Tax Credit, giving Canadians $250 a year for training, up to $5,000. EI training support benefit, which would give employees up to 4 weeks off for training. These are all new measures. How useful do you expect them to be?
I think they're a good start. I mean, the challenge we've got right now in Canada is that from a public sector perspective, we don't fund skills training nearly to the level that other advanced economies do. The level of coverage is patchy, so a lot of people who aren't eligible for employment insurance, for example, aren't eligible for public skills training. And the quality of the programs that people have access to is also quite hit and miss. I mean, those are challenges. So introducing programs like the ones in the budget last week, I think are a good step, because what they essentially do is they provide that autonomy to individual learners and say, okay, if you feel you need to take a course, here's some money that's going to help you defray the costs of taking that course. And you're also going to have EI support during the time that you're off work taking the course, so you're not at risk of losing your job either. So I mean, this is modeled, I think, on what Singapore has been doing over the past 3 or 4 years. They have a Skills Future program, which is very similar to this. But again, it's just a start. I mean, $5,000 over your life course is not a lot of money. I mean, an MBA at U of T costs $90-some thousand. So I mean,
$5,000 is not going to take you very far.
That's going to cover a couple of textbooks, basically.
But Mike, go ahead, follow up.
Well, I just to go back to what Stephen's saying a little bit about this seeking passion out in people, and then to go to the dollars. The dollars are great. I think anyone who takes away the fact that someone's going to solve this problem for you as an individual is taking the wrong message. If there's an expectation I will be paid to relearn and what have you, that just seems like a very dangerous future for us. What I believe in is setting the expectation that the new world order is continuous learning. One of the things we've done at FreshBooks, we're a very values-driven organization. We actually have a value around passion. The word doesn't matter, definition does, which is we're continuously working on our craft, and if we weren't doing it here, we'd be doing it somewhere else. And I want to hire people. The reason I want to hire them and they have passion is because they're going to have the energy to keep learning. I can't pay you to learn, and that's what the government, I hate to say, is kind of trying to do right now. I like the
Can I just
encouragement,
interrupt you
but
for a second on that?
yeah.
The feds are doing their thing on skills retraining. The province is doing its thing. The post-secondary world is doing its thing. Should we have an expectation that the corporate/private sector world ought to be in on this too?
Are you kidding me? I mean, in the sense that, like, are we ignorant of the level of investment people put into training and retraining their folks and creating an environment where they're learning new skills and changes? Like, I think you'd be stunned if you pulled on the covers and realized, like, hey, we're hiring people of capability. And I think this is important too, is, you want to have a learning and a growth mindset. I think that's what passion for something sort of fosters. The skills that we need, I mean, I think there's maybe an overemphasis on the technicalities of it. I'm looking for people who can communicate and collaborate, who can solve problems and have a desire to learn because they have some kind of passion about a thing. I take that and I mold it and I invest. I invest a great deal.
So you're
frankly.
there, you think?
Oh, I mean, it'll never end, and I think of it as fun. But I think important and frankly, we're building an industry. And if I get a little more specific around Toronto and the technology industry here, I'll expose my philosophy, which is, we don't have the people who've come before us who've built and trained and taught these people. We're in the first generation of this industry. This industry is going to be huge for us. It can be massive. We should be investing to support it. But we're trying to build the first generation of people who have some knowledge and experience. That's a huge gap that we have. The training and the technicality is not all of it. You actually need the experience. And that is the investment a company like myself and others are making to build the workforce of tomorrow, who will then go and build more people. So it's a bit of a cycle and generation.
So that's
thing.
great, and I commend Mike and other firms that are doing that, but that's not the story at the aggregate level in Canada. I mean, firms are investing about 30% less on average in employees than they did in the early 90s in Canada. We know firms are investing far less than their competitor firms in the US on things like research and development, machinery and equipment. So, I mean, governments in Canada have been keeping corporate tax rates low. And on average, I mean, obviously there are lots of exceptions, but on average, firms are not putting that money back into workers. They're not putting that money back into their own operations. So the question becomes, where is that bargain failing for us? It's not solely public sector responsibility to train workers for the private sector. We need the private sector in more numbers like Mike's company to come to the table and say, it's our business on the line. If we want to thrive in the new global economy, we're going to have to invest in workers. And the companies that do that, like Mike's, will thrive. And the ones that don't, they'll fail.
Well, can we do another real-life example here, Stephen? You'll correct me if I get this sort of too simplified here, but my understanding of your relationship with General Motors, for example, was that they had needs. You were a post-secondary institution which pumped out graduates that would help them meet their business needs. Now they're going. So in some respects, you don't have a pipe. There's nothing at the end of that pipeline through which your people can go now. Where does that leave your mission? Where does that leave the people who wanted to do that work?
Well, I think that the mission still stays the same. For us, it's always about being future focused on whatever industry it is. So the automobile industry and the Oshawa chapter in specific in that is far from over. So the GM chapter may be over, but the R&D is not over. And the R&D that's happening in Markham and that's happening within our wind tunnel is staggering. And so we're on that cutting edge, and it's about always redefining those relationships. But I just get back to the point of, I think that having corporate partners at the table is crucial. And I do think that while we have some great corporate partners like GM, like the OPGs, for example, that really do get it, and like Mike's firm that get it, I would underscore the point that there are a lot of SMEs, a lot of
Small, medium-sized enterprises.
Yeah, the small, medium enterprises, that tool and die makers, the heart of our economy, what makes it beat, that have not invested commensurate amounts of money into skills training. And a lot of it goes down the supply chain. So if you take an OPG and you look, they probably spend a disproportionate amount on things like skilled trades and other things that don't even end up working for them as employers, but they need them in the supply chain to make the power grid work. And so what you see is this reliance on a few players to always be stepping up. And sure, in the industries like Mike is in that are, at the cutting edge, they do tend to over commit in terms of being of money to the table. But what we really need to see is we need to understand that we're all in this together, and so we do need employers of all stripes to say this is an aggregate responsibility. It's not something that I can do on my own as a university. It's something that we need to do in partnership and collaboration, and it can't just be the large partners. It has to be the SMEs that are coming in as well.
Go ahead. I hear somebody wanting to follow up here. I see
I
Mike.
got a bunch of things. I wonder if we segment down to which industries we're talking about, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The skills needs. I think you're going to find industries like the one I participate in where there are huge investments going into, and there are other industries that are like, geez, the future is crumbling around us, and we're not sure we're going to be here anymore. And that, unfortunately, might be the tool and die makers. And so it's a different investment philosophy in training people. And if you can get to a better model and have hire that skill on demand.
Mike, do you want the governments to be picking winners and losers here? As in, we're going to
no, that's kind of like I'm on definitively like, hey, it's great that we're encouraging people to learn with dollars, but I think the world is changing around us. There are industries that are going one way that we're set up well to support. There are industries that are going another. That's a fact of the world today, and I think you're just experiencing different levels of training in different ones. And to go and encourage an industry where training is not necessarily the thing they need to do for their survival, frankly, I don't know that is the right-footed approach to this problem.
Well, let me ask Gladys. You're on about 25 different things here, Gladys. We're only going to talk about a few of them here tonight.
Okay.
The Future Skills Council.
Yes.
That's another initiative of the federal government.
It is.
In this pond that we're swimming in tonight. What's that all about?
So the Future Skills Council is an advisory council that's been formed. It's pan-Canadian in nature. There are 15 members on the council that are providing advice to the minister, Honourable Hadju, on what it will take to make Canadians future ready, what investments, what technology is required, what are the emerging trends that we need to be paying attention to as a country, and pulling together all of our intel from the various groups and bodies that we represent, perspectives from across the country, and bringing that to the table. So it provides some guidance, some oversight, some advice in terms of what will we need to do to ensure that Canadians are future ready and skilled so that we're able to better compete.
All right, you're the one private sector guy at this table. When you hear that, what do you think?
Yeah, it sounds nice. I like that we're thinking about it, and I do think the world has changed. I think a lot of that. What I would impart on some of the specifics is it's a lot of soft skills too that are going to be important to the future. And I don't know. Listen, I'm on the side of do as much as we can, right? So I'm great that people are thinking about this, and Gladys and I were talking just before we got in here. It seems like people are more open than ever across these various constituents and industries and across the country to trying to solve this problem. Yeah. I think it's a very real problem for Canada, and I think our mindset around it is we're not all the way there yet about how aggressively
let's see
we
who
need
we
to
can
push
learn
at
from.
it.
Sunil, you look around the world. Anybody else doing this better than us?
I mean, lots of countries are doing it better than us because they invest more money in their programs. I mean, a country like Denmark invests probably about 6 times proportionally more than Canada on active labor market programs. And they make it actually very easy to hire and fire people in Denmark. 25% of Danes in the private sector switch jobs every year, which sounds...
Every year?
Every year. Huh. Sounds daunting, but when you're let go from your job, your industry is changing, your employer doesn't need you, guess what? You have access to very high levels of income support and excellent training programs. So that's, I think, the model we want to move towards, where we don't want to hold on to dying industries. We want to let those industries go, move on to the future, but help those people who are left behind. And I mean, there's an economic imperative there too, because I mean, those investing $10,000, $15,000 in somebody in the short term, guess what? If that person makes that money back over the course of their lifetime, they're paying higher levels of tax, they're not drawing down on social assistance. There's a super clear sight line to the savings and benefits to government of investing in skills training. I mean, this isn't a long-term thing like full-day kindergarten. In 30 years, maybe we see the benefit of it, or 20 years. This is
more immediate.
If I get you into a better job tomorrow, you're paying higher taxes for me tomorrow as well.
Okay, with just a few minutes to go here, I do want to follow up with Stephen on the education front about some of the post-secondary sector is going through its own innovations and its own disruptions right now. How do you see that happening where you're at right now in Durham Region?
Well, I think that in Durham region, it's probably more poignant because we have gone through the GM crisis. So for us, it's certainly about a lot of the things that we talked about. Firstly, it has to be a very strong partnership between the university and our corporate partners. The notion of what a university is and what work integrated learning is, for example, has changed immensely. So I often have to tell people that unlike the universities we went to, today's work integrated learning, much of it happens on our campus. So we have as many people coming to work in our wind tunnel, coming in to work in our nuclear sim lab, coming to work in our various high-tech labs on campus as we do externally. So it's sort of getting a rewire around what is a university and what can a university do. And I think it really does get to the issue of that long-term learner. And I think that the feds have put their minds on two key issues. One is time and one is money, because people don't have those. But the third that I really think they have to grasp is the fear factor. And if you're losing your job and if things are being downsized, you're very afraid. And I'm not sure as a country we have a good enough strategy to say, how do we destigmatize fear? So for me, it is about creating continuing education opportunities where that learning environment is indeed a safe environment, where they feel like they can come back, they can hear a lecture first and think, okay, this isn't quite what I thought a university was, it's not as daunting, now I'm gonna try a course. And I think that unless we sort of tackle those fears, we're sort of chasing ghosts in this discussion rather than getting at the heart of what we're doing. Because you asked earlier, are we going to place bets? And Canadians typically, we don't like to place bets, but the reality is that the world is shifting and we're moving more and more towards a tech-based economy. And so the more that Canada sort of puts its head in the sand and says, you know, we're going to create superclusters, which is great, but they're going to sort of cover everything as opposed to picking a lane, the more it hurts us for our long-term future.
Well, I want to thank the four of you for getting our heads under the sand for this program in any way tonight. Stephen Murphy, Sunil Johal, Gladys, Okine, Mike McDermott, great to have all of you on TVO tonight, and congrats on the rebranding.
Thank you, sir.
Ontario
Appreciate it.
Tech U, there we go.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.